All right, so assignment 4, you're going to click on this link as you go out here. Let's right click on it, go to open a new tab. And up here, you're going to see the Shakespeare or Sherlock Holmes is going to have this story down here, right? And it's just a bunch of text of a story of Sherlock Holmes. We want to save this as a file called story.txt. So if I right click out here and I go to save as, and then let's go out to assignment 4 here. So let me just create one. All right. And then instead of engr.txt, it should be story.txt. And I can just leave the .text because that's a subtext. All right. So I hit save. Okay. So we save this story as story.txt. Zoom in here so you guys can see. And we need to start a new Python file. So let's go ahead and do that. We are going to need to put our initial comments up here. You guys should be used to that. The number one thing I'm seeing as I'm grading homework is, one, people forget to change the initial comments at the top. Like, it's not assignment 1 anymore, it's assignment 4. And when you change or save your file name, please use the file structure name that's at the beginning of this 8 weeks ago that we used in this course. So if you come out here, go to 360, over on the left under learning modules, I need you to use this file name. Please don't use assignment 4. Please don't use anything goofy. I have to download 75 of these in order to test them all and go through it, right? If you guys all call it assignment 4, it causes problems. Please stop doing that. All right. I have to take off points for that. I don't want to take off points. Please stop doing that. Okay. Let's get back down here where we were. First thing is going to be your initial comments. We got that. Again, just copy and paste that from back in the learning modules. It's not a big deal. Then I want you to read the file story.txt and store the lines as a variable called story. You must use relative paths and assume the story file is in the same folder as the same folder as your script that you're creating. So let's do something like importing that in. How would we open a file called story.txt? And we're going to call it story. So does anybody remember how we did that from, what's that? You could, but we don't necessarily need pathlib because we're going to be using it in the same directory. You're right, but since we're going to be using relative, we don't have to use pathlib. Hold on a second. Okay. All right. So what we want to do is we want that open. We're going to open a file. So we could do something like story file equals open. And then right here, it's going to tell you all the things you need to know for open. All right. So for open, we want the name of the file, which is story.txt. So we go story.txt. And then we need to tell it what mode we want to open it in. By default, it's in R mode, which means read only, right? So we could either say R like this, or we can leave the R out because that's implicit. Again, that's on a quiz. Make sure you understand how that works, right? If we said W, well, then we're opening it in write mode and we can write over this file, which we don't want to do, right? So we're going to use it in R mode. All right. That stores it as a variable called story file. We need to read the contents from that file and store that as a variable called story. All right. That was this part here. Store the lines as a variable called story. So you could do story equals story file dot read. But the problem with dot read is it doesn't read in the lines. It reads the whole text file in. So we want to specifically use read lines. And what that does is create a list of all the different lines in this particular story. And it's going to store that as a list with individual lines in it. So we can double check that just to make sure everything's going like we expect. Let's just print story for now. Let's go ahead and save this. We need to make sure we store this in the same folder as our story file. So let's go out here to Spring. I'm storing it in this. You guys obviously have a different file structure. and we'll store it here, right? And so this would be something like Jason Zeller assignment. If I could type 4, right? I save that. I can go ahead and run it. And you're going to see it says squeezed text, 674 lines of text in there. The reason we're getting that is it's this giant list of every text that's in there. You can double click this and it'll actually show it to you. Just know that every now and then idle will crash when you try to do that. That's the reason it squeezes it down. All right. So if you see that, you already know, okay, good, it read in the files. As you can see, as I start to scroll down, this is going to get really, really slow. So I'm going to stop doing that. Okay. But just know when that did that, it put every single line on there. We could do something like for line in story, print line. And if we do that, we'll take this line out, run this. And then it prints out every single line. Notice that once it's done here, give it a second, it's got 674 of them to do. You guys don't need to do this. I'm just demonstrating why it's doing what it's doing. I'll grab this. Notice it's in the same structure as that storyfile.txt. It's saving the actual lines. It's saving the spacing. It's saving everything in there as if we just opened up that text file. Okay. So those are your first 2 lines to get your first points. Is these 2 lines right here. So let's go ahead and just copy that in so we know that that's what that one covers. And let's go back over here. Make sure you set that as a comment. And you probably want to wrap that a little bit because it's really long. Something like that. Okay. So now our next part that we want to do is write a regular expression that will find all the occurrences of the phrase Sherlock Holmes. So this is kind of going back to right before we left on spring break. So let's put a comment here. Let's go ahead and just wrap this around so we don't have it going so far. Does anybody remember how to do regex? All right. It's not a problem if you don't. That's the whole point, is you know what chapter to go back to, right? So let's go back here to our table of contents. And we're going to go to chapter 7, pattern matching and regular expressions. So let's go back there. Let's pull it up here. And we're going to scroll down because we need to create it. First thing we need to do, import RE, right? So let's go back to our file. At the very top here, right under our initial comments, we need to import RE for regex. All right, let's scroll down. We see something like this phone number regex, right? So let's copy that. We're going to go down here. And instead of phone number regex, let's do something like Sherlock. And then inside here, we need to find something that matches exactly Sherlock Holmes, this right here. So all we have to do is just copy and paste this and put this right inside of here. We don't want /Ds because we're not looking for specifically digits. We're looking for the phrase Sherlock Holmes. And that's with Sherlock space Holmes, exactly in that capitalization, everything else. So that's the reason we just copy and paste that in. Anybody have any questions in that? Okay. That is our regular expression for Sherlock. And that one will help us find all the instances of that going in. So remember, when we want to find all instances, let's go to that. Does anybody remember what function we use for finding all instances? It's not a trick question. Find all, right? So let's scroll down till we get to the find all part. There we go, find all method. So we have our regex. We need to do a search. Will find us the first result. We want the find all section, which looks like this. So we're going to steal this same line here. Paste this in. Again, this is not phone number regex for us. It's Sherlock. And we're going to do a find all, and we need to pass it what we want to find that all in. So what would we pass inside the find all? Yeah, we want to pass in all the stuff we read, right? Like story. The only problem is story is actually a list. So what we really need to do is go through every single line in that list and do a find all on that line. So something like for line in story. Then we do our regex find all. And this would be something like line, right? Because now we're just wanting to go through every single line and trying to find Sherlock. When it finds that result, it's going to give us a list of whatever's in there. So what we need to do is say something like, let's say Mo for now, right? That's our matched object is all that means. So we find Mo, and then how do we know how many times it found it in there? So if it stores all the results in Mo, what can we do to Mo to figure out how many are in it? Len, right? So we can use the len function in order to calculate how many are in Mo. And so we could say Sherlock count equals the len of Mo. If there's nothing resulted, then Mo is going to be equal to 0. If there's 10 in there, then they found 10 Sherlock Holmes in that particular line. So that's how you would do a find all. This is your regex. This is going to start finding all of it. And this is actually going to go into the next part. So let's go back to our requirements. It says using the substitute method, replace all occurrences of Sherlock Holmes with your name, storing the count of these occurrences as found count. So instead of doing what we just did, we actually need to use the substitute method to replace Sherlock Holmes with whatever our name is. All right. So let's copy that out so you guys have that inside your file. Let's put that here. Here. Just gonna throw this over so you can see it. There we go. A little bit bigger. All right. So we're going to go through every line. This found every occurrence. Instead of find all, though, we want to use the what? Sub method, right? Somebody said it. So we want the sub method. And if we don't remember how to use the sub method, we just scroll on down. Let's find the substitution. There you go. Sub strings with the sub method. What this does is we use our compile, which we already have set up. We use dot sub and we pass in what we want to replace, right? Whatever string we want to put in. And then we pass the string that we're going to search through. So if we apply that to our file here, what would that look like on our side? What's the first thing we would pass into sub? Exactly. We would use our name, right? So something like Jason Zeller. And then we need to pass it the string that we want to search through, which in this case is what? Remember, we're in a for loop line, right? So we want to search through that line to see if we can replace Jason Zeller. And if that happens, we want to get a number of how many times we did that. So that's a little bit of a trick one, right? We could do the len portion that we did before to find out how many there are total in the story, because that would tell us how many we would be replacing. So if we did something like that, this would do our substitute. We would need to do that other calculation first. So we could do something like Sherlock dot regex, right? Sherlock regex dot find all, and we're going to find all of I just forgot what I was doing. Let's go back to find all. Yeah, we just pass it the string that we want to find everything in, and that gives us back a list of what's coming in, right? So let's go in here, find all. We're going to find all in line, and we're going to set that to our whatever count it was talking about. It's called found count. So we want to set our variable here specifically to found count equals whatever all of those are, and we're going to calculate the len of that. So this would be something like find, and then we're going to calculate the len of that. So that becomes our found count equals the len of find, something like that. That gives us the total number of how many occurrences we found of Sherlock Holmes. And then we want to get our substitution as we go through here, if it found it. All right. Now, what's the problem with what you see and we did here? Does anybody see what we did? So found count will determine the number of Sherlock Holmes that were in this particular line that we're going through, right? But we need the found count for overall, which means we have to get some kind of variable outside of our for loop, and then we update that variable. Otherwise, it's just going to be what? 1 or 0, right? It's either going to find it 1 time or it's going to find it 0 times. So we would do something like found count equals 0. And then when we find this, we want to update found count with whatever we found, however many we found. So that would be found count plus whatever the length of whatever we found. Does anybody know the shorthand way of doing this? Yep. So we could go back here, take this out, and go plus equal, and that would do the exact same thing. All right. So what's this little piece of code going to do? It's going to go through every single line in that story. It's going to try to find all of the Sherlock Holmes. When it found all of those, it's going to calculate how many of them it found and update found count so that we have a running total. From there, it's going to substitute Jason Zeller for whatever we found in that line. So if it found Sherlock Holmes, because we're running this regex, then we're going to replace that with Jason Zeller. Right. Let's go back down here to our sub. So we can see that. Remember, this is what we replace it with. This is the line that we want to check as we go through there. All right. Now, if you did a little bit of Google searching, you'll actually find a shorthand way of doing this, in that you could use what's called sub in. And sub in is going to return you 2 results. It's going to return you that it substituted something. It's also going to return how many times it substituted it. So we could split that out using multiple assignment, et cetera, et cetera. But for based on what you learned in this class, this is the way you could do it. All right. So let's test that real quick. Let's just print found count to see how many times it happens when we look at this. So let's do run. We come back with 5. So it found Sherlock Holmes in here 5 times. Does anybody know how we could test to make sure we got the right number? Well, it's just a text file, right? So let's go open up our text file. Remember, we stored that up here. There's our story.txt. Open it up in Notepad. We do a Control F, and we look for specifically Sherlock space Holmes. Hit enter. And it said it found it how many times? Actually, in this one, it doesn't show you how many times it found it, right? But we know we found it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it starts over. Okay. Another way you could do that, open it up in Microsoft Word. It's probably going to tell you exactly how many occurrences are. Another way to do that in here is if you guys had it was something like Notepad++ or something like that, that would actually give you the total count. So there's a couple different ways you can double check your work to make sure you're getting the right number up here. That's going to be important for the next section. All right. So let's go on with our homework assignment and see what the next step is. Here, Oh, I know a good way. Does anybody know a good way to test regex? Hey, there you go. We gave you a tool for that, right? regex101.com. We come over here and choose Python. We choose our string that we want to search, Sherlock Holmes, right? That's what we created for our regex. And then this is where we want to test it. So what can we do here? Take everything in our story, Control A, Control C, come back here to regex, dump it in. And now we're going to find out how many of these ended up matching up. So if we do our regular expression, maybe that one. Helps if I spell it correctly, right? Sherlock Holmes, we come over here, we find 5 match cases. So this is a great way to test exactly what's going to happen inside your assignment. Okay. If we go back to our homework assignment, we need the next part that says write a regular expression that will find all of the occurrences of the phrase the. Well, if we just do what we did here with Sherlock Holmes, let's comment this part out. We, instead of Sherlock Holmes, we're going to call this like the regex or something. And in here, we just put the, right? Now, if we test that back over here and we just put the, does anybody see an issue with this one? Exactly. It's finding any THE that's possible in this assignment, which means it's going to find words like Hatherley's and other or brother or mother. It's going to find anything with THE in it. That's a problem. So we need to restrict it down to just finding the word the. So if you guys remember down here in this quick reference, how could we restrict it to just this word the, where we're specifically looking for this chunk of the? Yep, what that part's going to do is look for something specifically at the start of the string. So in this case, we would have to look at like something that starts with a T, and then we'd have to look at something that ends with an E. But that could be the word 3. That could be anything else. You're on the right path. So normally when you want the, you would think of something like space, the space, right? And so what would space characters be if we looked at something like that over here? Little white space character, right? So any white space character, the word the, and then any white space character after that. So let's try that. And you can notice our count over here goes to 406. And normally you would probably be right. It's going to be really, really close on these. However, somewhere in here that doesn't quite match up. In other words, it's as a sentence that does not have a space before it, or something goofy comes in here because the 406 number is not quite right. It's close, but it's not quite right. Does anybody else see anything over here that would also help? And if you guys remember when I was showing you this regex 101, I gave you a hint, hint, wink, wink back in that day. And yes, it's on the screen right now. So the exactly 3 of A would look specifically for 3 A's in a row. Let's see, Bo came up, start and end. That's the start and end Bo is what he just mentioned here. That one wouldn't quite work because that's going to look for something at the start and it's going to look for something at the end. Yay, there we go. So if you remember back when I was saying that, at the very bottom is one you want to remember. that's going to set up a word boundary. And so what that does is specifically only look for this word inside of it. So we're going to look for the, and instead of S's, let's use B's. And if we use B's, that gets us the real count, which is 407. So somewhere in here, there's a THE that doesn't quite look as a word and doesn't set up all the initial results. Yep, word boundary. Now, this is going to find what, though, specifically? Notice we missed two thes at the very top of this thing, right? Right. So right now it's just looking for the lowercase of the word the. If we wanted to catch all of the capital thes, so if a sentence started with the, etc., with a capital T, it's not going to find it. So in order to do that, we would have to use the modifier of something like r dot I, which would allow us to ignore case. Now you can't test that inside here. So for now, I accept answers of both the lowercase as well as the option of ignoring case. And you could choose to do that if you wanted to. But this is the string we want to use for the. So if we come back to our homework assignment, and instead of the here, we want /b the /b. Try and get this back here. There we go. Now, how you would change that is you could do comma re dot ignore case. And that would catch all of those, whether it's uppercase, lowercase, doesn't matter, it would catch them. However, that changes the number. Now I accept that. That number is 438. But I do accept that one because you could do that. In theory, the homework assignment is very explicit because it tells you the and doesn't tell you to ignore cases. So take that out. All right. Rest of the homework assignment. Now it says create a variable called the count, and it stores the total number of the phrases the. Well, this one, we're not having to replace anything, so it's a little less code, but it would look like just what we did up above for found count. So if we go to for line in story, find equals the regex dot find all. We're going to find all of those in a line. And then we need to make sure we have this other one over here now called the count, right? That's the found count that we need to set up. So there's our regular expression. Let's see here, this one. Something like that. And we want to store all the occurrences in a phrase called the count very specifically. So we're now going to add a the count up here. Start off at 0. And then we need to do a the count plus equals the count. Oh, sorry. The len of our find that we get in between there. Okay. Remember, if we didn't do the len part and we just said plus equals find, whatever the len of that is, the problem is that could find it one time and we only update it for the one time we found it in there. So that's the key for using find all versus search. If we use search, it's just going to find the first occurrence and add 1 to the count. It's going to mess up your count overall. So to double check that, we could do print the count. And we could double check that that prints out the right number. So let's go ahead and run it. We now got our 407. Okay. So now we're going to come out here and look at the next 2 points. Let's copy those in. And it's really going to have us do print statements that do exactly that. So let me fold this down here so we can see it. All right, so print to the user the original name, the replacement name, and the total number of occurrences using a print statement with a formatted string literal using a string that starts with F. So what does that mean? This means that I want you to use your F statements as you're going through. So you do a print, you do an F, and then your double quote, and now you're going to format that. So we want to say original name, and that was Sherlock Holmes, right? And then we could come down here and do our replacement name. So I got this messed up. Let's go up here. Replacement name is whatever your replacement name is. All right. And then the last part is the total number of occurrences, total. And this is where we use our formatted squiggly bracket in order to put in found count, right? And what that will do is take our variable found count and stick it right inside this F string. Okay. Then you're going to do the same thing on this next one that tells you how to do that with all the occurrences of the word the. So we'll need to make sure we comment this out. Again, using an F string. So we would have something like print F. In that F string, we want to total count of the. And of course, we need to use single quotes for this so that we don't mess up our string. And this would be something like the count. Okay. Run that real quick. We should get two there. Original name, Sherlock Holmes. Replacement name, Jason Zeller. Totals 5. Total count of the 407. And then the last piece here is we need to know how to save that story out as a new file. So does anybody remember how we save files? All right, we're going to do it just like we opened them up here. So we're going to call this 2 lines right here. Come back down here. We want to open in what mode? Write mode, right? The thing is we don't want to call it story. We want to call a new file, and it's supposed to be called new story. So instead of story file down here, let's call it new story file. And once we've created that and stored that, then we want new story file dot read lines or write lines? Write lines, right? And is it the new file that we want to write in there? So write lines is going to be a little bit different. We want to put in the story, which is what we've been modifying all along. And that is what we're going to write out. So we're going to write lines of story. And then we need to do what when we're done writing files? Close it, right? So we'll have new story file dot close. And we probably should do that up here where we actually close the file. So story file dot close. And that should save out the new file at that point. So let's go ahead and run that. Yes, I forgot to comment that out. There we go. We get the output we expected. We go look at the folder. We now have a new file called new story. Let's open that up and make sure that Sherlock Holmes is gone. It's not. So how do we fix that? Or in other words, why is that not saving what we were doing earlier? So if we go back and look at the part where we're supposed to be substituting, what's wrong with this substitution that's causing that not to actually store that line? I know you can tell what it is because you're looking right at it. Well, we have Mo equals Sherlock regex dot sub, and then we take what we're wanting to replace it with and the line that we want to search through, right? The output of this is the result that we want. It's Jason Zeller is now replaced Sherlock Holmes. But I called that match object, which we're not really doing anything with match object. So what should that be? Should be our string of text, right? So that would be our line, right? We are going through every line in this story. We're going to take that line, we're going to substitute it and store that back as the current line. So let's try that and see if that does it. That looks good. We come over here on this side, open up new story. Still see Sherlock Holmes here. All right, let's go back and look at our automate the boring stuff, and we can see how this is doing it. It should be substituting that in the line and going through and replacing that, right? Based off whatever our substitution is here. We're finding our Sherlock Holmes. It's off our Sherlock regex. Anybody have any ideas of what we can do? Or any ideas of how we could troubleshoot this? We could double check this, right? We could say print line, and then we're going to do our replacement and then print line. And then let's do a break right after that so that we don't actually go through every single line for right now. So let's run. And in that first line, we should be getting text here, but we're not really getting any text. So why is that not printing out our line? Total count's also 5 now. Should be 5, right? Once I added this stuff in, it didn't actually update the count like we would expect. Should get a count of 1 for every time it finds it, if it finds it in all the lines. So the reason we're not getting any output is there is no Sherlock Holmes in the first line of this. I told it to break. So let's go ahead and undo the break and run this. It's going to spit out a bunch of garbage here, but it should go through. It's basically doubling the story because it's going to print the line, then it should print the replacement line right below it. So we got our 5 back. Let's go back and find Sherlock Holmes. Oh, it's back at the very beginning. So it found our friend, Mr. Sherlock Holmes, and then it found Sherlock Holmes. So it's not really doing the substitute like we would expect, right? We need to figure out how we're going to store that. So let's go back to line equals. If I can find it. Better yet, let's not double it up. Let's just print it out at the end and see what happens. Let's close that. Now we're getting close on time here, so let's make sure that we get you at least close. If not, that'll be the line that you have to figure out. All right, that looks like it's actually saving it out correctly, right? So for line and story, that all appears to be good. That's storing it out. If that actually ran, let's go back over here and double check. Still doesn't do it in the output of the line. So we are replacing that line that's in here. The problem is it doesn't look like we're updating story, right? And the reason we would need to update story is because it only exists within this little for loop. So we got to figure out how to update story overall or rewrite that line inside story. So that'll be the one last little piece I give you left on homework assignment 4 is figuring out how you can store this string so that it actually saves it in the story file. Right? And you know that issue is somewhere right in here. So don't worry about the rest of this. Focus on this to see how you could get it to store this file back. All right, stop this recording.